Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everybody to the Breathing for Energy virtual event. I am incredibly excited. I have an absolutely power-packed presentation for you with some really cutting edge science that very few people, including very few doctors and health practitioners, are even aware of. This is really powerful information. And this is not just going to be a bunch of fluff, or it's not just going to be a bunch of fluff and a sales pitch. My goal here is to give you a ton of actual practical value that has the potential to change your life. And I'm going to give that to you for free in this presentation. I also want to mention that, well, you know what? First, I need to just make sure you guys can see and hear me okay. So let's do that first. I see a lot of people. While we're at just over 5,000 or just right about 5,000 people so far. And I'm sure there's going to be more people joining us in the next few minutes. So that is amazing how much interest there is in this. I am incredibly excited about that. Let me know. Okay, you see Bonnie saying, I can see you. Amanda said, we see and hear you. Perfect. Wonderful. I need to check one more thing. And that is to make sure that you can see my slides. So I'm going to switch over to my slides, and then I'm going to switch back here to make sure to check the chat responses. Make sure you can see that, and then forgive. There's a little 15-second delay or so, so it just takes a minute for me to, from the time I do it until I see your responses. That's just the price you pay for bouncing information off of satellites in the atmosphere to people all over the world. So let me just check this really quick. Okay, allow. And let me make sure. So can you guys tell me if you can see my slides on the screen, please? Slides are visible, looking good. Wonderful. Okay, amazing. So here's what we're going to do. Welcome everybody. So, wow. Okay, let me know where you guys are from. I'll wait for all 5,000 responses. No, I'm just kidding. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to screen share. I'm going to turn off the chat for now. And okay, thank you, Greg, for that info on sound quality. I appreciate that. And I'm going to turn off chat for now, and then I'm going to turn it back on later, and I'm going to take questions. I'm going to do a live Q&A. I'm going to try to take as many questions as possible. Given there's 5,000 people on this call, there might be 6 hours of questions. So hopefully I will try to do as many as possible. Make sure you stick around to the end where I can take all of your questions. And you are absolutely not going to want to miss this. This is truly power-packed, life-changing information. It's not going to be a bunch of fluff. So with all of that said, here we go. So first of all, if you don't know anything about me, I was voted the #1 health influencer of 2020 by the biggest natural health and functional medicine community, the Mindshare community. I am a 2-time best-selling author. I've got a bachelor's in kinesiology. I've recently completed my coursework for my PhD in clinical psychology. Also got advanced certifications in nutrition and fitness and corrective exercise and athletic training and all kinds of good stuff. I'm the creator of the Energy Blueprint, the founder of the Energy Blueprint podcast, and most importantly, I am a certified health nut for the last 25 years. Since I was a little kid, I've been studying as my singular obsession, the science of human health. So first of all, here is a simple 1-minute test that can give you an objective clue as to whether you are in need of this program or not. Okay, whether you truly have dysfunctional breathing. And this is called the BOLT test, or the body oxygen level test. And here's what this tells you. First of all, it tells you if your breathing is optimal or dysfunctional. It shows you your CO2 tolerance. It shows you your cellular ability to extract oxygen and to utilize oxygen. It's a wonderful proxy. It's the best test I found for actually giving you an indication of your body's overall vitality and energy. And it gives you a wonderful objective test that you can do in less than a minute to track your progress and track your overall energy levels. So here's how to do it. A few key pointers here. This is basically a breath hold test. However, there's a couple important distinctions. One is we're holding after a normal exhale, not after heavy breathing, not after a big inhale. We're not going and then holding. We're actually just breathing normally, normal breaths, in and out through the nose. And then we're going to do a normal exhale, pinch our nose, and we're going to hold not till our absolute limit, but until our first urge to breathe. Okay, that's the very quick version of how to do this. So we're going to breathe normally through our nose, exhale, and hold the nose and wait until you feel the first urge to breathe, and then you're going to take a normal breath. You'll know if you did it too long, because if you have to gasp for air and take heavy breaths, that means that you did more of a maximal breath hold time rather than a BOLT test, a body oxygen level test. So I'm going to put on the countdown clock here, and we're going to do this together. Okay, so we're going to take a couple normal breaths in and out through the nose, and then after a normal exhale, we're going to pinch our nose and hold our breath. Ready? And go. Okay, so pretty much everybody should be done at this point, I suspect, and maybe you were done a lot sooner than that. So basically, that test gives you an indication of what's going on in your body, and do you have dysfunctional breathing or not? So here's what this means and why it's important. The way that this test works is essentially that when you hold your breath, levels of oxygen stop entering your lungs, and no CO2, no carbon dioxide, can leave your lungs. So oxygen levels drop, CO2 levels rise. So what this tells you, how quick you feel the urge to breathe, is a reflection of your body's efficiency at extracting and utilizing oxygen to produce energy, and even more so, your body's carbon dioxide sensitivity, which is a critically important and very little known, even among doctors and health professionals, concept to understand that relates in big ways to our energy levels, our overall health, and our anxiety levels. Okay, now what's normal? Well, many years ago, it was established by this famous McArdle exercise physiology textbook. They measured it in young, healthy people and found that young, healthy people consistently have about 40-second BOLT scores, 40 seconds or more. That is what's optimal, okay, plain and simple. And we actually have a physiology textbook where researchers have scientifically determined that that is what's associated with good health. Now, here's why this matters. This is a reflection. Your BOLT score gives you an indication of how your nervous system and your brain are regulating your breathing rate, your breathing frequency, and your breathing volume. So a BOLT score of 10 seconds will look something like this. What you're seeing here is the time, you're getting an indication of the duration and the volume of each breath. So this is a 10-second BOLT score. This is a 20-second BOLT score. You see much lower volume of breath, and each breath is over the same period of time. You're seeing much fewer breaths. So each breath is much longer than in the 10-second version. And then at 30 seconds, even longer breaths and lighter breaths with less volume of air going in and out. And a BOLT score of 40 seconds is ultralight breathing, very small volume of air coming in and out over a very long duration of time. This is what healthy breathing looks like. So what does your BOLT score say about you? It gives you an indication of your sports performance and your fitness, and It also, most importantly, gives you an indication of your energy levels. Anything below 25 seconds of your bolt score is an indicator of dysfunctional breathing. Now, if you're in above 30, you're doing good. And if you're above 40, that is healthy and optimal. If you're below 25, that is an objective indicator that your nervous system and brain are regulating your breathing rate in a dysfunctional way. Now, we're going to talk about why that is, but the key point is that your breathing is dysfunctional and there are major consequences of that. Low bolt scores reliably correlate to low energy levels and are a big cause of low energy levels. So here's what you need to understand. This, again, it's an objective test that gives you an indication of your body's energy levels. And as you work to improve your bolt score, for every 5 seconds that you improve your bolt score, you will notice, you absolutely will notice big improvements in your energy levels and reductions in your levels of stress and anxiety and your overall resilience. But again, big improvements in energy reliably correspond to improving your bolt scores. So how do you improve your bolt score? Well, we're going to talk about some of the keys to doing that. But one of the things I want you to commit to that is so important for anybody struggling with low energy levels and high anxiety levels is to use your bolt score, to take it every day, to really commit to doing it first thing in the morning. You take your bolt score, it takes less than a minute, very easy to do. Write down your bolt score and also write down your energy level on a scale of 1 to 10 and your anxiety or levels of tension next to that, again, on a scale of 1 to 10. And track the trend. What you're going to see is as you do some of the exercises that I'm going to teach you here, what you're going to find out is that as you improve your bolt score, your energy levels increase and your anxiety levels decrease very reliably, very predictably. Okay, now the next big key to energy is optimizing your breathing for deep oxygenation of your cells. So first thing to understand here is deep breathing, which is commonly taught in yoga circles, meditation circles, even a lot of breathing circles. They teach you that optimal breathing is something like this. Big full expansions of the belly, and every breath should kind of open everything up fully. This is absolutely wrong. It is totally wrong information. It is a very common myth that is taught and perpetuated by many, many tens of thousands of people, and it's just simply wrong. So deep breathing is actually not a sign of health, and breathing more, this is the important part, breathing more does not get more oxygen into your cells. I know this is very counterintuitive, but it does not work that way. Yes, it's true. Oxygen is the fuel that your muscles need to work efficiently. However, what most people need to know is that their oxygen saturation of their blood, of their red blood cells, is already maxed out. It's already at high capacity. And breathing more, taking lots of deep breaths, doesn't saturate your blood anymore, nor does it deliver oxygen better to your tissues. And this is a key distinction we're going to talk about. Because we're already at maximal oxygen carrying capacity in our blood, the solution is not to try to breathe more to get even more oxygen in. We're already maxed out. So deep breathing doesn't help us because we don't actually have a deficiency of oxygen. In fact, our blood carries a surplus of oxygen. We exhale 75% of the oxygen that we take in during rest, and even during exercise, we exhale about 25% of the oxygen that we're taking in on each breath. So there is no shortage of oxygen. There is no need to do deep breathing in order to try to oxygenate your body more. And what's more than that, deep breathing has consequences. We're going to talk about why. In a similar way to if you told somebody who was already eating sufficient calories to maintain their body weight, the key to having more energy is to eat even more food. It just doesn't work that way. Only thing that's going to happen if you do that is you're going to get fat. You won't get any more energy from it. And in fact, you will get less energy by overfeeding your body. So the same is true with breathing. Now, I want you to think of a young, healthy person and an older person, maybe dealing with heart issues or something like that. let's imagine these two people are going for a gentle walk together. Who of these two is going to be breathing the hardest and deepest on that walk? Which one of them is going to be breathing like that? Well, the answer is not the healthy person, not the young healthy person. It's the old unhealthy person. Okay, and the reason why is that we have misconceived of deep breathing as a healthy thing. Deep breathing in a resting state is not a sign of health. It's a sign of poor health. Okay, in a resting state, a healthy person breathes extremely slowly, extremely lightly, very small volume of air flowing in and out. This is a big misconception and a very important one. And I'll tell you, I messed myself up and gave myself chronic anxiety for years because I was trying to train myself to do these deep belly breaths all the time, because that's what I learned was optimal breathing, and it's just wrong. And it has big consequences for many people, including me. So chronic deep breathing actually mimics a state of physiological stress. So if you see me, when might you see me doing breathing like this? Well, you'd see me breathing like that after I maybe just did sprints up a big hill or something like that. And I was doing some really intense exercise, okay, which is a state of physiological stress. It's normal and healthy to be breathing like that in that context of when you're doing very intense physical exercise. But when you breathe like that in a resting state, you're mimicking stress, you're mimicking physiological stress, and your breathing actually ties directly into your nervous system. So your nervous system takes a cue from your breathing rate as to whether it should be in a state of stress or not. So if you compare someone who is breathing heavily versus breathing lightly, like if you think of a baby sleeping, for example, you're going to see very slow, very gentle movement of the belly and chest as it rises and falls during a very slow breathing. That is what optimal breathing at rest looks like. Very slow, very light breathing. So this is, again, a major misconception that people have, that deep breathing is a sign of good health, and it's just wrong. Now, the key is this is unconsciously or non-consciously regulated by your brain. So what is regulating it? And this is what we need to understand. There's two key things here. One is breathing frequency, how many breaths you take in a given period of time. So here you see 4 breaths taken over, let's say 15 seconds, and here you see 2 breaths taken over the same period of time. So there's the rate of breathing, and there's the volume of each breath, how much air is flowing in and out. So here you see much greater volumes of air flowing in and out on each breath compared to down here. So what is regulating this non-consciously? Why do some people breathe like this and some people breathe like this? Why are their nervous systems regulating their breathing differently? It's not oxygen that is influencing it. It's actually carbon dioxide that is the primary regulator. The rate and volume of breathing is determined by receptors in the brain that are sensing levels of carbon dioxide and regulating breathing rate and breathing volume in response to carbon dioxide levels, much like a house thermostat is regulating temperature in response to what's going on with the temperature in that house. Should I switch on the heat or the air conditioning? Okay, so these brain receptors monitor levels of carbon dioxide, and they monitor the pH, which correlates with and is influenced by levels of carbon dioxide in the blood. Okay. So when levels of carbon dioxide increase above a certain threshold, those CO2 receptors in the brain fire and they stimulate breathing. Okay, they stimulate increased breathing and bigger volumes of breathing to get rid of what it perceives as excess levels of carbon dioxide. This is the fundamental thing that is regulating your breathing rate. But here's the big problem. CO2 is not just a waste gas that our body needs to get rid of. Okay, many people think this is a big misconception, very common. We breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. Okay, it's partially true, However, people think of carbon dioxide as just as this waste gas that our body's trying to get rid of. It's actually a very, very important substance that plays a critical role in our body. Our bodies need a certain amount of it. And the main reason why is that it helps in oxygen delivery to our cells. So CO2 is not just a waste gas, it is the secret key to getting oxygen into your cells. Here's the most important part to understand. Okay, we don't actually blow off all of the CO2. We don't take in a whole bunch of oxygen, use all this oxygen, and then blow off all the CO2. That's not how it works. We retain a whole bunch of the CO2 that is produced with each breath. Okay, there's a whole bunch of that CO2 that we are designed not to breathe out and expel. We're designed to retain it and keep it in our system. This is not a mistake. We're designed to do that because the CO2 is playing a critical role in our body. So what is going on? What is CO2 being used for? Well, here's what you need to understand. Your red blood cells, this is what carries oxygen in your body. That oxygen, when those red blood cells in the capillaries go to the sacs of air in your lungs, and that's where they pick up oxygen that you're breathing in. So when you inhale, okay, air is flowing into your lungs, and then that oxygen needs to go from your lungs into the blood and then bond to the red blood cells, so the red blood cells can carry them around and deliver them to the different tissues of your body. Okay, so that happens, that bond happens where oxygen connects to those red blood cells. Okay, but now those red blood cells are carrying that oxygen throughout our body. How do they know when to drop it off? Which cells to deliver that oxygen? Well, the answer to that has to do with CO2. And basically, this is something called the Bohr effect. And the Bohr effect talks about how at different levels of carbon dioxide in the blood, in the cells, where the blood is interacting with the cells, that influences that bond between the oxygen molecules and the hemoglobin, the red blood cells. Okay, so they're tightly connected until they encounter higher levels of carbon dioxide. And those higher levels of carbon dioxide that is what allows that oxygen to separate from the red blood cells and go into the cells where the cells can use that oxygen to produce energy. Now, if you have chronically low levels of carbon dioxide, which is what they're calling here as hypocapnia, that means low carbon dioxide levels, what that does is it heavily influences what's called the hemoglobin oxygen saturation, which is how tightly bound the oxygen is to the red blood cell. Okay, and at low levels of carbon dioxide, that oxygen is very tightly bound to the red blood cells. It is the higher levels of carbon dioxide that cause the dissociation, the disconnection of the oxygen with the red blood cells, so that oxygen can be dropped off in the cells and utilized to produce energy. So higher levels of carbon dioxide is the key to allowing oxygen to separate from the red blood cells and get into your cells where it can be used to produce energy. So think of it like this. Carbon dioxide is the doorway that lets oxygen reach your muscles, your brain, your organs. If the door is only partially open, only some of that oxygen is going to be able to pass through. And if the door is wide open, that's when oxygen is able to flow through very, very effectively. So this is what's counterintuitive. When you take deep breaths, it doesn't help you get more oxygen to your cells. What it's actually doing is blowing off too much CO2 and lowering your levels of CO2 in your blood, which actually hinders delivery of oxygen to your cells. So overbreathing reduces the ability of oxygen to get delivered to your cells where it can produce energy. Overbreathing is therefore one of the biggest factors that wrecks our energy levels and causes chronic anxiety. Now, the big key to understand here is, again, what's regulating this? How do some people get chronically wired into a state where they're overbreathing? And the answer is that chronic overbreathing means, first of all, it means breathing a volume of air greater than that which your body requires. And that can be breathing too much with each breath and breathing too frequently. And usually those two go together, okay? Overbreathing means too much carbon dioxide is being exhaled from the lungs and removed from the blood. So you have lower levels of carbon dioxide in your body than what's optimal. Now, what causes this? Well, there's a few different factors that cause someone to get wired into this state. One is low levels of fitness. If you've been mostly sedentary, if you're not a consistent exerciser, this actually causes your body to become dysregulated in terms of matching the levels of carbon dioxide that are being produced by your muscles to the breathing rate to exhaling carbon dioxide. So being somewhat physically active, which means at least doing walking on a daily basis, is critical for that system to regulate properly. In addition, processed food, believe it or not, is another factor that influences this, because one of the big roles of CO2 in the bloodstream is actually to modulate the pH level, whether you have more acidic blood or more alkaline blood. So our body tries to maintain a very tight pH range, and CO2 is used in that process to maintain that level of the proper level of pH in the blood. Now, processed foods, as a general rule, tend to be acidifying to the blood. In the scientific literature, they talk about this as potential renal acid load. And we know, we can grade all hundreds of different foods in terms of their PRAL value, their potential renal acid load value. And as a general rule, processed foods are acidifying to the blood. It doesn't mean they actually make your blood acidic, because we have this pH buffering system that's designed to keep our pH where it belongs. But when it taxes that buffering system, how does your body respond if there's too much acid load on the blood? Well, one of the things that it does is it lowers CO2 levels, because if it has high CO2 levels, then that actually will make the blood more acidic. So if you're eating a processed food diet, it's pushing the blood towards an acidic pH, and the body lowers levels of CO2 in response to that to try to keep the pH where it belongs. So in other words, the body lowers CO2 to adapt to a poor diet, okay? And you now have too low of levels of CO2 in response to that. Now, in addition, one of the other big factors that causes this is simply chronic stress. Chronic psychological stress itself tends to, the body's response to chronic psychological stress, or to psychological stress in general, even if it's not chronic, is to try to blow off CO2, which lowers its stress levels. So if you're in a chronic psychological state of stress, the body will chronically be trying to get rid of excess CO2. And over time, with enough chronic stress, will become actually wired into a state where it changes your breathing regulation, your breathing frequency, and your breathing volume to be chronically trying to de-stress the system. So the combination of these three factors, for some people, it's one more than the others, or for some people, it's all three at the same time. Each individual is different, but one or more of these factors wires into the brain and the nervous system to regulate breathing in a dysfunctional way so that you're chronically overbreathing. Now, people can be breathing 200 to 300% greater volumes of air than is actually required by them without actually noticing anything is wrong. And once that's wired in, their brain regulates that every minute, every hour of every day. And you are then chronically offloading too much CO2, which has consequences. So chronic overbreathing is one of the absolute biggest factors in low levels of energy and high levels of anxiety that almost no one is even aware of, not even doctors or health professionals. Most people have no idea about this critical link between your breathing and the way your brain is regulating your breathing with your energy levels your oxygen delivery to your cells, and your brain's perception of anxiety, which we're going to talk more about. Okay, so quick recap here. Deep breathing is actually stress breathing. CO2 is not just a waste gas. It plays many critical roles in your physiology. The most important one is that it helps to deliver oxygen to your cells. This is the key to getting the oxygen to disconnect from the red blood cell, where it can be dropped off in your cells and used to produce energy. Number 4 is over breathing. Decreases CO2 levels and sensitizes the body to CO2. And number 5 is one of the biggest hidden factors in low energy levels and high anxiety levels is chronic overbreathing and chronic low levels of CO2. So how do we fix this? How do we fix our overbreathing and optimize our CO2 levels? Well, there's 3 fundamental steps here. One is to eliminate excess CO2 loss. And we do that by training the 4 keys to optimal breathing, which I'm going to tell you about in a moment. Number 2 is we improve our CO2 tolerance. And number 3 is we reset our CO2 threshold. So 4 keys to healthy breathing. We want light breathing, not deep breathing. Again, healthy breathing, it looks like a baby sleeping. Very slow, very light, very gentle. Okay, that's what optimal breathing looks like. 2, slow breathing, not fast breathing. Number 3 is nasal breathing, not mouth breathing. And number 4 is diaphragmatic breathing, belly breathing, not chest breathing. Okay, so very briefly, breathing slow is critical. Here you can see what this actually looks like. What we're shooting for is healthy breathing or optimal breathing. We want long breaths, especially long exhales, where we have something between roughly 4 to about 12 on the high end breaths per minute. That's what optimal breathing looks like. And the fewer breaths per minute you have, the more that's going to be an indication of good health and high energy levels and a very high CO2 tolerance. Okay, so that's what we're shooting for. Key number 2 is nasal breathing. Very, very important. Breathe through your nose, not your mouth. As Patrick says, Patrick McCowan, the breathing expert that I partnered with to create the Breathing for Energy program. Noses are for breathing, mouths are for eating. Okay, nasal breathing is so important. There's so many benefits of breathing through the nose rather than the mouth. But the number 1 benefit is that it produces lots of nitric oxide, which is this gas that plays a critical role in airway dilation and in blood vessel dilation. And ultimately, what that means is that when we breathe through our nose and we have higher levels of nitric oxide being produced, that is going to open up our circulation and allow for blood and oxygen to be effectively delivered to our muscles, to our brain, to our organs, where those tissues can produce energy effectively. If we're mouth breathing and we don't have nitric oxide present, those blood vessels are going to be constricted, and we're going to be chronically restricting the flow of blood and oxygen to the cells of our body. Now, nitric oxide has many, many benefits beyond just that, but that's the major one. Here's a cool little tip, by the way. Humming on the exhale like this increases nitric oxide production by 15-fold. So again, that's influencing circulation, but nitric oxide is also doing something else that's profound, which is that it's influencing the ability of upper respiratory tract infections, viruses, to take hold in your system. So we know that people who breathe through their mouth are at much higher risk of upper respiratory tract infections. And the reason why is that our nose acts as a filter, and it also produces that nitric oxide, which it turns out is strongly antimicrobial and antiviral. So we know that, for example, there's a spray that's produced by an Israeli company where you spray this thing in your nose, and it's a substance that dramatically increases the amount of nitric oxide that's present, and they found that it kills 99.9% of the virus SARS-CoV-2 that causes COVID. Okay, so nitric oxide kills viruses. Very, very important to breathe through your nose. So Breathing through our mouth means no nitric oxide or very little nitric oxide production. Breathing through the nose increases nitric oxide production by 6-fold, and humming on the exhales increases nitric oxide production by 15-fold. Optimal breathing key number 3, breathe into your belly, not your chest. This is straightforward. People have probably heard this advice before. It's good advice. It's one of the more common pieces of breathing advice that's out there that is actually good advice. One of the key things to understand about this is that when we breathe through our belly, we are mimicking relaxed breathing. Okay, when we breathe predominantly through our chest, that is stress breathing, and that ties directly into our nervous system in our brain, which is either giving it stress signals or relaxation signals. So we want, the vast majority of the time, unless you're actually in need of, to do something stressful, to do something intense, running to catch a plane or something like that, or running to save somebody's life on the train tracks or whatever it is, we want to be in a state of relaxation the vast majority of the time. And so we want to be belly breathing rather than chest breathing. Key number 4 is breathe light to breathe right. So what we want to do is not just focus on the length of time that each breath takes, but also, more importantly, the volume of air coming in and out. So what you see on the left here and what you see on the right are breaths that are taking the same amount of time, but this one on the right has a much, much bigger volume of air coming in over 2 seconds and flowing out over 3 to 4 seconds than this one on the left. We want to be much more like the one on the right, very light breathing, very small amounts of air coming in and out. This is a nice way of explaining it. This is a Qigong and Tai Chi master, Chris Pei, who says there are 3 levels of breathing. The first one is breathing so softly that the person next to you can't hear you breathing. The second one is breathe so softly that you can't hear yourself breathing. And the third one is breathe so softly that you can't even feel yourself breathing. Okay, so let's do this quick breathing exercise to give you a sense of how you can start to entrain your nervous system to be better at this. This is one of the keys that we use to start to increase the body's CO2 tolerance and the brain's CO2 tolerance, so it can start to regulate breathing in a slightly different way. So I want you to put 2 fingers beneath your nose. Don't plug your nostrils, just put those 2 fingers beneath your nose and breathe in and out through your nose a few times. Okay, notice the air flowing on your fingers and get a sense of how much air, keep your fingers there, notice how much air is flowing in and out over your fingers. And now what I want you to do is just try to cut that in half so that you're breathing in half as much air and exhaling half as much air on each breath. And now I want you to make it even slower. So we're taking in half as much air and trying to do it even slower. Okay, and if you do that for 3 or 4 more breaths, you should start to have some air hunger building up. You should start to have some desire to go back to your normal breathing habits. Okay, and that's okay. That's CO2 levels rising and your brain saying, oh, you need to take a breath, right? And so this is one of the very simple exercises that we can use to start strengthening our CO2 tolerance and changing our brain's perception of CO2. So just like lifting a weight leads to that getting stronger, when we challenge the muscle, it gets stronger. The same thing is true here. When we challenge the brain to tolerate higher levels of CO2 for brief periods of time, for a few minutes a day, the brain can learn to tolerate higher levels of carbon dioxide. So this is one of the very simple exercises that is key to starting to retrain the way your brain regulates your breathing habits. And this is a nice quote from Lao Tzu. He said, the perfect human breathes as though they are not breathing at all. So if you want something to shoot for, to give you a sense, again, of what is optimal breathing, it's not this. It's breathing that's so light, so soft, so gentle, so slow, so small in terms of the amount of volume of air flowing in and out that it's almost imperceptible. That's what we're shooting for. Okay, so 4 keys to healthy breathing. Again, light breathing, slow breathing, nasal breathing, and diaphragmatic breathing. Quick summary here is harnessing the power of CO2 and nitric oxide is the big key to supercharging oxygen delivery to your cells. We want higher levels of CO2 and higher levels of nitric oxide. That opens up the airways, opens up the blood vessels, allows for efficient oxygen extraction from the lungs, allows for circulation of the blood and oxygen to be delivered effectively to the tissues. And the higher levels of CO2 allow that oxygen to separate from the red blood cells and move into the cells and the mitochondria where they can be used to produce energy. Overbreathing decreases levels of CO2 in your body and sensitizes your brain to CO2 so that your brain starts regulating CO2 levels in a way where the threshold of CO2 is lowered and your brain is constantly sensing that CO2 levels are too high. And so it's constantly trying to blow off excess CO2 because that CO2 threshold is now being regulated too low. The brain is too sensitive to carbon dioxide. The number 3 is one of the biggest factors to getting rid of anxiety and increasing energy is eliminating overbreathing and increasing levels of CO2. Number 4, we must train our brain into a new automatic non-conscious breathing pattern, which is diaphragmatic breathing, nasal breathing, slow and light breathing. And number 5, we have to stop blowing off too much CO2. We need to increase our CO2 tolerance and reset our CO2 threshold. And I'm going to show you in a second one of the big keys to doing that. Okay, energy key number 3. This is how we reset our brain and nervous system out of chronic stress and anxiety mode. So the first thing to understand here is that our nervous system is regulating this. It's regulating not only our breathing rate, but it's regulating our alertness versus calmness. Our nervous system links the brain and body. This is what is integrating all of our sensations and perceptions and thoughts and actions. It's also controlling housekeeping functions like the non-consciously regulating our heartbeat, our intestinal and stomach contractions and digestion, and our respiration, our breathing. And again, regulating our alertness versus calmness. How stressed are we and how relaxed or calm are we? So this is called the arousal continuum. On this end, we're alert, we're awake, but we're calm and relaxed. On this end, we're stressed and panicked and in a high anxiety state. Okay. Now, it is almost always the case that being on the calm side of this is better. This is where we want to be in terms of our day-to-day life. There are scenarios where, again, if you're running to catch a plane or doing intense physical training, where it's good to be in stress physiology. It's normal, it's healthy, it's proper in that context, but this is not where we want to spend most of our days. It's not optimal for almost everything, for work, for social interactions, for focus, for our mood and our sense of well-being. It's bad almost across the board. So we want to train our nervous system to be more in a state of relaxation. We also know there are many, many negative, harmful effects of stress, from dysregulating hormones to causing fatigue, to depressing immune function, to causing anxiety. But it's also the case that our nervous system and brain came built with mechanisms to both induce stress and turn it off. And when we understand that, we can use those mechanisms to our advantage. So when we're under stress, we often experience increased breathing rate, increased heart rate, and a racing mind and anxiety. And what most people do when they're in this state is they try to work on their mind. Mindfulness practices, meditation, cognitive behavioral therapy, other kinds of mental, psychological techniques to try to get rid of what's going on in the mind. Okay, but it is actually the case that it works way better to work on your breath. And the reason why this works way better to modulate your breathing, which decreases your nervous system's stress state, what's called your sympathetic nervous system. It's part of the autonomic nervous system, or it's the fight or flight part of the nervous system, which is essentially synonymous with being in stress physiology. Okay. And if we decrease the activation of that stress sympathetic nervous system, that is actually the fastest and most effective way to change what's going on in our mind, to decrease or eliminate the stress and anxiety. Why is that? As you probably have experienced, it's very difficult to try to use your mind to regain control of your mind when your mind's going out of control. This is really like trying to grasp fog or grasp smoke with our hands and hold on to it. It's almost impossible to do. With a lot of training, you can get some results, but I'll tell you, it's way faster, it's way simpler, and way easier and more effective to use your physiology, and specifically to use your breathing. And the reason why is because the breath directly interfaces with the nervous system. So it turns out that every time we inhale, what happens is the diaphragm moves down and the heart actually slightly expands. And when that happens, when there's more space in the heart, the flow of blood slightly slows down. And the heart then communicates a signal to the brain that says, oh, blood flow is slowing down. You better speed up the beating of the heart to respond to that. And the brain then stimulates the sympathetic nervous system to slightly speed up the heart rate and increase the flow of blood. And then on the exhale, it does the opposite. The diaphragm moves up, constricts the heart slightly, blood pressure and blood flow increase, and then the brain gets that signal and then actually responds to that by slowing down the heart rate by activating the parasympathetic, the relaxation part of the nervous system. Now, this is remarkable, and believe it or not, this happens on every single breath you take. Your brain is modulating the activation of the nervous system every breath you take. When you breathe in, it stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, speeds up your heart rate. When you breathe out, it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, the relaxation response, and slows down the heart rate. So there is this direct interface between your breathing rate and the regulation of your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, fight or flight, or rest and digest, relaxation response. Okay, so the magic of breathing is that there is this direct interface with the nervous system. Now, what's also unique about this is, unlike heart rate or digestive functions, our breathing is this magical thing that we are able to control consciously, in addition to the fact that the brain is regulating it all the time non-consciously. So it's there, just like the contraction of muscles in our intestines or our heart rate is being regulated all the time by our brain non-consciously without us doing anything. The same is true of breathing, but the difference is we also have the ability to consciously and voluntarily say, well, I'm going to choose to breathe this way in this moment. And that gives us the blessing and this opportunity to use our breathing to directly interface with our nervous system. So what I want to give you here is the single fastest way to lower anxiety in your brain, which is the physiological sigh. So there's a specific group of neurons that is based in the brainstem of all mammals that control a breathing pattern called the physiological sigh. This is something that people and mammals do spontaneously during sleep, that humans do during crying and during states of extreme stress. So Mother Nature built this powerful calming technology into us hundreds of thousands of years ago. Everyone has these neurons in their brain, and it was designed into our biology specifically for the purpose of calming us. So we're all designed to do this unconsciously during certain circumstances of extreme stress and so on. But again, the beauty is we can also control this consciously. So here's how to do this. The physiological sigh is very simple. It takes only a minute to learn. Basically, it's a double inhale through the nose and an exhale through the mouth. Now, The trick of this double inhale through the nose, it's done in a very specific way. You do mostly a full inhale through the nose, and then you kind of do a powerful, quick little burst of additional air at the end of it, and then you do a long, slow exhale. The more you exaggerate exhales, the more you have shorter inhales and longer exhales, drawn out exhales, the more you are stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's one of the things going on here, but this double inhale is also doing something very special. I'll tell you about that in a moment, but let's practice this, how to do this first. Again, this is the single fastest way ever discovered to dramatically lower stress and anxiety levels in the brain and nervous system. So here's how we do it. Pretty full inhale through the nose, and then another quick burst, and then a long, slow exhale. Okay, again, double inhale through the nose with this rhythm. Okay, the beauty of this is it literally takes only 2 to 3 of these physiological sighs to rapidly, within seconds, reduce or eliminate stress and anxiety in the brain. So here's how this works. Turns out that your lungs are not just 2 big bags of air. They are actually composed of millions of little sacs called alveoli. And these sacs of air are not fully expanded all the time during normal breathing. So what happens when we do that second burst of that inhale, that goes like this. It fully expands all these little sacs of air. And then when we exhale from there, we get this huge offloading of carbon dioxide, much, much greater than a normal breath or even a deep breath. We get maximal offloading of CO2, a very quick reduction in CO2. And it turns out that CO2 levels actually play a critical role in levels of stress and anxiety. And we know this from a whole bunch of different lines of research. So for example, we know that in chronic breathing disorders, anxiety is extremely high. Another line of research is when you ask people to inhale solutions with 5% or 7.5% carbon dioxide, it rapidly induces anxiety. So we know from these kinds of studies that CO2 is actually a big factor in our brain's perception of stress and anxiety. We also know, and this is the flip side of this to really emphasize the point, we know that retraining our breathing habits, doing some simple breathing practices, can dramatically reduce our levels of anxiety. Okay, and this study is the effectiveness of diaphragmatic breathing on relaxation and relaxation training for reducing anxiety. This is another one where they did breathing therapy and looked at reductions in anxiety levels. This is another study, self-regulation of breathing as a primary treatment for anxiety. And this is another one just to show you how simple and how easy this is, and how little effort is involved to get serious results. This is a study in high school students where they gave these students 5 minutes of breathing practice and just 3 times a week. So a total of 15 minutes of practice over an entire 7 days. And just from 5 minutes done 3 times a week, they were able to dramatically increase their CO2 tolerance and dramatically decrease their levels of anxiety. So that's how powerful this is. So we know that CO2 is playing a big role in our brain's perception of anxiety. And we know that simple breathing practices, even done as little as 5 minutes of practice every other day or less than every other day, can yield a profound reduction in anxiety by increasing our CO2 tolerance. And the reductions in anxiety that they saw in these high school students directly correlated with how much the students improved their brain's CO2 tolerance. So again, this is one of the biggest factors in anxiety that almost nobody knows or talks about. No doctors, no even psychologists, psychotherapists, almost no one is even aware of this research linking breathing and breathing dysfunction to higher levels of anxiety. This is one of the most common causes of anxiety, and again, almost nobody is even aware of it. So the bottom line here is if you have a low CO2 threshold, it wires your brain into a state of chronic stress and anxiety. And if you have a high CO2 threshold, it puts your physiology into a state of relaxation and resilience and takes you out of chronic stress and anxiety mode. And again, the single fastest way to do that is to use that physiological sigh. Okay, 2 to 3 breaths is enough to rapidly reduce anxiety. This profoundly resets the nervous system. And the next step that you need to do beyond this to really to not just address stress and anxiety in the moment in real time to rapidly reduce it when you feel it, but to reduce stress and anxiety all the time is to actually rewire your brain's regulation of your breathing. And that's really what this Breathing for Energy program is designed to do. It's designed to take you from someone who's chronically over breathing to teaching your brain, rewiring and resetting your CO2 threshold, rewiring your nervous system to regulate breathing in a healthy and optimal way rather than in a dysfunctional way that creates low energy levels and high levels of anxiety. So quick summary here, the most powerful way to hack your nervous system to reduce stress and anxiety is the breath. Don't try to do it with your mind, engage your physiology. We want to both retrain the automatic non-conscious breathing pattern to increase our CO2 tolerance and reduce chronic tendencies to be in stress and anxiety, and also consciously use breathing techniques in the moment of stress to rapidly reduce anxiety. And number 3, we want to use physiological sighs, which are the technology that Mother Nature endowed us with for exactly this purpose. And she also fortunately gave us the ability to control it voluntarily. And you can use this during moments of stress. You can also use it during workouts, and you can use it before bed, especially if you're somebody who struggles to sleep. Energy key number 4, and this is the big key to really resetting your CO2 threshold and supercharging your energy production. It is intermittent hypoxic training, breath holding practices. There's a number of different ways of doing this. Fundamentally, what's going on here is this is all about your mitochondria. Mitochondria are the big key to energy production. These are the energy generators in our cells. And one of the big keys to understand about mitochondria is that between the ages of 20 to 70, most people lose the vast majority of their mitochondrial capacity. Their mitochondria, their energy generators in their cells, are literally shrinking and atrophying and dying off. Most people lose half of their mitochondrial capacity between the ages of 20 to 40, and then it gets cut in half again between the ages of 40 to 70. But it's also been shown that this doesn't have to happen. The primary reason this happens is not just because it's a natural product of aging. It isn't. It's actually the result of loss of hormesis in your life. What is hormesis? Hormesis is the process by which a mild or acute stressor increases the resistance to other stressors and increases the health, resilience, and vitality and energy of that organism, in this case, you. Now, there are many different types of hormesis. The classic one, of course, is exercise, but there are many other types of hormesis. Sauna exposure, cold exposure, different kinds of light exposure, UV light or red and near infrared light, which I've written a book about, intermittent fasting, nutrient cycling. These are all types of hormetic stress on the body. And the body, when subjected to these different types of metabolic stressors, can actually grow stronger and more resilient and more energetic as a result of them. Now, of all the different types of hormesis that I've experimented with over 25 years of studying health science, this type, intermittent hypoxic training, is the single fastest way I have ever found to reliably and predictably increase energy levels in people who are struggling with fatigue. It is truly amazing. And it also powerfully resets that carbon dioxide threshold in the brain and has an enormous impact on decreasing stress, decreasing chronic anxiety, and increasing resilience to stress in people who are struggling with anxiety and chronic stress. So this is just an amazing tool. It is a gift. It's one of the absolute most powerful health enhancing and energy enhancing and anxiety crushing technologies available. So intermittent hypoxic training is using breathing techniques to induce low oxygen levels in the blood and in the cells in the mitochondria to progressively train the mitochondria and train the cells to utilize oxygen more efficiently and produce energy more efficiently. There are many different confirmed scientific benefits to this type of training. So some of the benefits are improving mitochondrial function, inducing mitochondrial biogenesis. So you're stimulating the mitochondria to actually grow bigger and stronger and creating new mitochondria from scratch. You're decreasing inflammation, you're boosting immune function, you're increasing exercise performance, you're increasing nervous system balance, you're improving your sleep, you're increasing mental calmness and toughness, you're increasing your resistance to stress, and you're increasing your energy levels. Now, there are some other really cool layers of what this is doing to our physiology. It actually mimics altitude training. And in addition to resetting our brain for a higher carbon dioxide tolerance and a higher carbon dioxide threshold, it also reduces stress and fatigue of working muscles, and it improves recovery time. It decreases lactic acid production, which is a big factor in people dealing with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. And this is really cool. It increases the production of EPO, which is erythropoietin. This is a hormone that is produced when we go to altitude that stimulates the body to increase the amount of red blood cells in the bloodstream. So we know that just a few minutes of breath holding practices, a few rounds of breath holding practices done over just a few minutes actually causes a surge of red blood cells to be secreted from the spleen to increase the body's oxygen carrying capacity. So this is just awesome. Just a few minutes of training can literally cause more red blood cells to be floating around in your bloodstream carrying oxygen. Pretty incredible. So some of the mechanisms of how this is working in our body. Hypoxia, intermittent hypoxic training teaches your blood to extract oxygen more efficiently from the lungs. So we have these sacs of air in our lungs, these alveoli, and we have little capillaries with red blood cells moving around them. And the intermittent hypoxic training literally physically alters the structural interface between the air sacs and the blood so that the blood can actually extract oxygen and drop off carbon dioxide more efficiently than it could before. In addition, it does the same thing at the cellular level, where the blood and the red blood cells meet the cells and come into the mitochondria. The cells and the mitochondria all learn to extract oxygen from the blood more efficiently. And the mitochondria also learn to produce energy more effectively. And they actually grow bigger and stronger to be able to extract oxygen and utilize that oxygen to produce energy more efficiently. In addition, this is really cool, and I'll link this up with something in a moment. It helps protect your mitochondria from damage during stressors and during low oxygen states. Now, hold on to that thought because I'm going to show you something cool in a second. So we know there are studies where they actually have shown this, where they've done biopsies on, for example, mitochondria in rats subjected to intermittent hypoxic training. And what they've shown is the mitochondria grow profoundly and it physically alters the structure of the mitochondria so they can extract oxygen and pump out energy more efficiently. Now, this is really cool. These are brand new studies as of 2021, where they're looking at intermittent hypoxic training, or what they're calling hypoxic preconditioning, same thing, as an approach to COVID-19, severe COVID-19 prevention and COVID-19 rehabilitation. And what they're talking about here is teaching the cells to be more resilient in low oxygen states. And this is one of the fundamental things that's going on in COVID, that we now have a tool that we can use to help condition our body, precondition our body to be able to be more resilient and tolerate low oxygen states better. So our cells can actually handle, and our mitochondria can handle those low oxygen states without incurring so much damage and inflammation and triggering so much inflammation, which is one of the big problems in COVID. Now, I'm not saying this is a cure for COVID or anything like that. What I am saying is that it is a tool that very likely can be used to help prevent more serious outcomes from COVID by using this type of breathing practice. Now, some of these studies, everything's still brand new. So, of course, I'm not trying to make any medical claims here, but I do think it is very likely that this can have tremendous benefit in helping the body be more resilient to these infections and to recover much more easily. Now, this study here is saying the patient's prognosis recovery can be effectively improved by ameliorating the dysfunction of the respiratory system, cardiovascular systems, and immune function. And intermittent hypoxic training, preconditioning is a new non-drug treatment, has been applied in the clinical and rehabilitative practice for treating chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, diabetes, coronary heart disease, heart failure, hypertension, and other diseases. Many clinical studies have confirmed that intermittent hypoxic training can improve cardiopulmonary, that's heart and lung function, of patients and increase the cardiorespiratory fitness and the tolerance of tissues and organs to ischemia, to low blood perfusion and low oxygen states. So this is really cool, exciting research that scientists are already applying this technology in the context of helping to prevent severe COVID outcomes and helping patients recover. And I just wanted to link that up to show you, hey, I'm not just making this stuff up. There's a lot of scientists who are actually using this technology and even using it in the context of what's going on right now. Now, this is probably my favorite study on intermittent hypoxic training. They found in this study of over 100 people that intermittent hypoxic training may be a bona fide anti-aging treatment and works through a variety of different anti-aging mechanisms. Rejuvenation of mitochondria, decrease of oxidation, oxidative damage at the cellular level, increasing and improving the internal antioxidant defense system, decreasing lipid peroxidation, which is decreasing the amount of damage that's done inside the cell from various kinds of stressors, improving oxygen absorption, transportation, and utilization. Okay, think more energy levels. And they showed a variety of other things, increasing EPO, that's that hormone that increases red blood cells, and even facilitating stem cell dependent tissue repair. So there's so many different amazing anti-aging benefits of this type of practice. But of course, the big goals of this program, of the Breathing for Energy program, are increased energy and decreased anxiety. So how do you actually use this method in your life? There are a variety of different practices out there. There's fire breathing practices, pranayamas, where you do breath holding. There's Wim Hof or DMT or Tumo style breathing. There's a variety of different practices. There's also just breath holding practices while doing walking. That's another way of doing it. And one of the other big amazing aspects of this is this training. When you do these breath hold practices, you're inducing a mild state of physiological stress, but you're self-inducing it. Okay, and one of the big keys to stress is not just how stressed you are, but how you got there. Okay, did it happen due to circumstances outside of your control where your physiology is just kind of running wild, or did you consciously self-induce it from a good place, from a relaxed place and a happy place, right? And then once you're in that state, that makes a big difference. Now, the reason why is that this gives you an amazing opportunity to start to train your brain and train your physiology how to divorce physiological stress and the adrenaline dumped and all those stress hormones coursing through your system and that activation of your sympathetic nervous system, all those stress physiology mechanisms, how to divorce that from the mental state of feeling stressed. So this gives you, in other words, an opportunity to train yourself for calm and relaxation and resilience while under physiological stress. And it's hard to overstate the benefits that can come from that training. It's truly amazing how much you can make yourself way more mentally strong under pressure, under stress, and way more resilient to the stressors of life by using this as a way to self-inoculate yourself against stress. It is there's all these amazing physiological benefits, what they're doing to your mitochondria and changing the structural interface of the lung blood interface and the blood cell interface, and growing your mitochondria to extract and oxygen and utilize oxygen to produce energy more efficiently. There's all these physiological effects, but there's also an equally powerful mental effect that can come from this when you do it right. So this gives you an overview of the new science of breathing and how we can rewire our CO2 sensitivity and our CO2 tolerance and CO2 threshold in our brain, and change how our brain is regulating our breathing rate and our breathing volume, which dramatically influences the delivery of oxygen to our cells and dramatically influences our brain's regulation of stress and anxiety. And ultimately, by going from dysfunctional breathing to highly functional optimal breathing, you can dramatically increase your energy levels and decrease your levels of stress and anxiety in your brain in an enormously powerful way. And that is why I've partnered with world-renowned breathing expert Patrick McKeown to bring you the most powerful and cutting-edge breathing course ever created for energy levels and reducing anxiety. And it is the Breathing for Energy program. It is truly an incredible program. It is obviously, I'm biased, but my goal in creating this program is creating the absolute most powerful breathing program on the market for increasing energy levels and decreasing anxiety. And I believe we have unquestionably succeeded in that. So here's what you get in the program. The first one is a much deeper dive into advanced breathing science than the one I just gave you here. And I show you step by step how to do everything and how these exercises are rewiring your physiology to increase energy levels and to decrease anxiety. So here's some of the things that you're going to learn. The 4 keys to optimal breathing, how to take control of your internal levels of CO2, nitric oxide, and oxygen to optimize your moment-to-moment energy, focus, and relaxation, neurological hacks to increase energy, relaxation, and focus, how to permanently rewire your brain for energy and focus, the 4 steps to rewire your nervous system out of stress mode with guided practices, why intermittent hypoxic training is the single fastest way to increase your energy I've ever discovered, and something cool I'm going to show you in a minute on that. Then there's 4 specific tracks, full programs within the program that have been designed by Patrick. There's one specifically for people with ME, CFS, fibromyalgia, burnout, anybody with severe fatigue or stress-related exhaustion and fatigue. This is a program all about recovering your energy, but doing it in a gentle way, right? The people who are dealing with more severe states of fatigue, if you have debilitating CFS, you can't jump straight into intermittent hypoxic training. You have to start with much more gentle practices, build that foundation and build your way up. And in this program, within the program, the track that you get here, you're going to get tools to rewire your brain and nervous system, learn how to breathe properly, and reset your brain's regulation of breathing so you can start to breathe optimally instead of dysfunctionally, which is rampant in people with chronic fatigue. This is a 7-week progressive, gentle program specifically designed for people with severe fatigue and with ME, CFS. There's also a track specifically designed for people with sleep struggles, whether it's sleep apnea or snoring or insomnia. This module is specific for everybody who is struggling to sleep. And it is truly amazing what these practices can do to optimize your sleep. There's also another track specifically designed by Patrick for people with anxiety and panic disorders to dramatically lower stress and anxiety in the brain. Patrick has worked with thousands and thousands of people who struggle with anxiety and panic disorders, and he's designed this track specifically for them with unique exercises to address these specific problems. And in addition to those 3 tracks, there's also a track for people who are already healthy, already fit, already energetic, who are looking to take their energy levels to new heights and their fitness and performance, mental and physical performance, to new heights. And there's a whole track specifically designed for people who are like me, for example, who are already healthy, already fit, already highly energetic, who are looking to take things to the next level. And this has been a true game changer for me. Again, the single fastest way I found to increase my already high energy levels. This is another amazing layer to it. I'm really excited to say that I partnered with a friend of mine to create 6 full levels of progressive, guided intermittent hypoxic training practices. These are video practices with music, with visuals. They're really fun. All you've got to do is press play and follow along. They'll guide you through the whole practice. And we've got, this is the big key, we've got 6 full levels of this to take you from 10 to 15 second breath holds all the way up to multi-minute breath holds. And this, by doing these practices, it is absolutely just a true game changer as far as increasing energy levels. This is remarkable, and having these 6 levels to guide you through from one week to the next, to start building up that capacity and building up your intermittent hypoxic training practice. That is the big key to results. So we've created these full 6 levels, again, from beginner to very advanced, and they will guide you. They will build that capacity in you, so you can go from level 1 or level 2, work on that for a couple weeks, and then go up to level 3. And within a couple months, you're going to be up at level 4, 5, and 6. And you're going to see huge changes in your health and your energy levels that parallel that. Again, very fun, simple practices. I do these every single day, every morning after I get up. Press play, you follow along, and it's really fun. And it's kind of like a game that you can play with yourself to challenge yourself to see if you can improve just a little bit more than the last time you did it. In addition, there's also several bonuses that I'm going to give you. One is Yoga Nidra. This is yogic sleep. And this is to retrain your nervous system into states of ultra deep relaxation and to retrain your breathing regulation into very, very light, gentle breathing. So this is not yoga in the traditional sense. It's not doing postures, and it's not anything exercise. It's actually guided meditation of sorts. It's a very unique kind of meditation that puts you in a totally different state of consciousness that takes you into what they call yogic sleep, which is this ultra deep state of relaxation. Very, very important for how we retrain the nervous system and brain to regulate our physiology and regulate our nervous system activation and our breathing in a new way. This is also an incredibly powerful practice for anxiety, and there's research showing this helps to recharge the dopamine and serotonin circuits in our brain and help rebalance our neurotransmitters, which influences not only energy levels, but sleep, but focus, and also, of course, our anxiety levels. Bonus number 2, there's also 2 guided practices. One is a shamanic meditative breathwork practice, and another one that is an energizing breathwork practice. It's 20-minute practice, and it layers in many different types of breathing that creates a really strong energizing effect. These are just fun practices to play around with and experiment with, learning how to change your physiology by using different kinds, and change your consciousness by using different kinds of breathing practices. And I've also included 2 elite level 20 to 30 minute guided intermittent hypoxic training practices to take you to special forces, Navy SEAL level. These are very advanced multi-minute breath holding practices, full-blown, all out practices. These are long practices, 20 to 30 minute breathwork sessions. So if you want to take it to that level, we have that available to you. So if you're already fit, already healthy, you've already got big breathing capacity and breath hold time built up, and you're already a fit, energetic person, this is something that can absolutely take things to the next level for you. One of these practices is still too challenging for me. but this is right around the level that I'm working on. And number four, bonus number four, there's also another video where I take you through some of the things that I layer into the intermittent hypoxic training practices, how to combine them with different kinds of yogic bandhas that help pump cerebrospinal fluid and help train the pelvic floor muscles and other kind of little utilized muscles that help move energy and blood and circulation throughout our body. And there's also another video where I take you through how to use specific posture training practices to reshape your spinal posture as you do these breathing practices. And it's the single most powerful way I've ever found to address posture, is combining the intermittent hypoxic training breathing practices with these specific different postures that help stretch out and elongate and straighten the spine and the neck. Really, really cool to pair these together in this way. I've never seen anybody else doing it. It's something I created on my own. And really, it's been amazing for me personally, that the single most powerful thing I've ever found to help me address my spinal posture. In addition, you are also going to get an ultimate guarantee from me, where I am guaranteeing that you experience huge results in terms of increasing your energy levels, decreasing your anxiety levels, improving your overall health and resilience. And if you don't experience very noticeable, very profound benefits, we will give you your money back. No questions asked. All you got to do is send us an email and you get your money back. So you have absolutely nothing to lose here and so much to gain. This is an amazing program. And here, let me recap everything you're getting here. So you're going to get the module Advanced Breathing Science with me. The value is $200. You're going to get the Chronic Fatigue Fixed Track, $200 value. The Sleep Fixed Track, $100 value. The Rewire Your Brain Out of Chronic Stress and Anxiety Track, which is $100 value. The Advanced Energy Training Track, which is $100 value. The 6 levels of guided intermittent hypoxic training, which is a $300 value. The 4 amazing bonuses, which is a $300 value. And the total value of all of this is $1,300. But right now, you get all of this for just $297. We're doing a special on the initial launch here, $297. The price is going to go up after this weekend, and the price is going to go up to $497 right after that. So this will be your chance to get this program for 40% off, get $200 off the normal price, and get all of this $1,300 value for $1,000 off the total value, getting it at just $297. So get this program if you're someone who is struggling with your energy levels, struggling with chronic anxiety. Do yourself a favor. Get this program right now. This is honestly the single biggest game changer I have ever found in over 25 years of studying health science, as far as increasing energy levels and decreasing anxiety levels. So get the program. Again, there's a 30-day guarantee. You can try the whole thing out for 30 days, do everything, learn everything I have to teach, and play around with all of the techniques and the exercises. And I'm guaranteeing that you will experience huge results in terms of your energy levels and decreasing your anxiety and improving your overall health status and resilience. And if for any reason you don't, or you're unhappy with it for any reason, all you have to do is ask for your money back, and you got it. No questions asked. So you have so much to gain and nothing to lose. Take the chance on this. I think you are going to love it. And I think you're going to find this is a true game changer for your health and your energy levels. So let me make this available for you to purchase, and I'll turn on the chat and answer some questions for you. So chat is on. And now that offer should be available for you. And you can click that button to buy now and purchase. Get the program, and you can get started right away, and you can get access to this material. You can get access to all of Patrick's different tracks. You can get access to my content, and you can get access to the fully guided intermittent hypoxic training practices so you can get started. This is very, very easy stuff. Okay, I went very in depth on a whole bunch of science. Some of the science may feel complex and overwhelming, but this is actually something that can take only a few minutes a day, and you can see huge changes in your life. Just think back to that one study I showed you in high school students, where they had them do 3 times a week of training for just 5 minutes, only 5 minutes, total of 15 minutes per week. And they showed huge reductions, 30+% improvement in CO2 tolerance, CO2 threshold, as well as big reductions in anxiety, just from 15 minutes a week. So it's very simple. It's very easy. You don't have to purchase anything once you're in there. There's no fancy technology. There's no upsells. There's no other purchases you need to make. You're just learning how to hack into your own nervous system and control your own physiology. So with all of that said, let me answer some questions. Hope you guys enjoyed this presentation, by the way. Okay. So can we go at our own pace? Yes, absolutely. How long is the offer for? The offer is going to be available for a few days at this price, and then it's going to go up to $497. D said, what causes yawning and what is happening when a person needs to yawn frequently? Yeah, great question. What you're doing there is essentially like a physiological sigh. That is an indication that your brain is hypersensitive to CO2, and you're yawning to try to exhale out what your brain perceives as excess CO2 to calm down your nervous system. Essentially, your brain is trying to calm you down, to calm down your nervous system because you're hypersensitive to CO2. Anne said this was absolutely fascinating, feeling overwhelmed by the info. Yeah, again, that's the big benefit of just the fully guided practices. So you can take all of this information and synthesize it down into something that takes just a few minutes. All you got to do is press play and boom, follow along, you're done. Okay. Claire, ooh, this is a tricky one right now. You're asking, can you talk about how the CO2 levels are affected by mask wearing and how that impacts fatigue and energy levels? This is a question that, because COVID science has become so highly politicized and politically charged, and people feel so intense about it, I need to be a bit careful about how I answer this question. But suffice it to say, here's how I'll answer it simply. It is the case that when you wear a mask, you increase your levels of CO2. You end up breathing a lot more CO2. If done chronically, that can contribute to a chronic state of stress and anxiety. However, if it's done acutely for shorter periods of time, it may actually have a training effect where it helps increase your CO2 tolerance. Okay, so that's how I'll state it in a sort of in a way that is unlikely to anger anybody tremendously. There are definitely contexts where it's going to contribute to changing your physiology in ways that contribute to a state of anxiety and fear. And there's also ways of using it or time periods of using it where it's unlikely to create any harm and maybe even could create some benefit when used acutely for shorter periods of time. Louisa, any comment to nose breathing with a chronic nasal turbinates condition? Yeah, so there's really two situations as far as nose breathing that are important. One would be nasal obstructions that are not so severe. And in that state, there are certain exercises, nose unblocking exercises that Patrick teaches in the program that can open up those airways profoundly. Also doing the humming practice and really building up your capacity for nasal breathing can make a huge difference in your capacity for, optimizing your ability to do nasal breathing as your baseline breathing habit, as well as during the period of sleep. However, it is also possible that the nasal obstructions can be so severe that they may require surgery to fix. So there's many different degrees of issues there, and that makes sort of all the difference. But the vast majority of people don't need surgery and can just use the exercise to learn how to open up those airways better. Lisa said, is this suitable for people with a high ACE score with PTSD to do with, among other things, oxygen deprivation? Yeah, Lisa, that's a really good question. To some extent, you can liken this to what I said about severe chronic fatigue, ME, CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome. For those people who don't know what CFS is, it's something that you would want to go very slowly and gently into. If you're seeing a psychotherapist, I would talk to them about it. And on the other hand, it's also something that has profound potential to help you, right? So it's all in the matter of the dose and intensity in the context of that individual. If that person is hypersensitive, they need to approach things very, very slowly, very gently, not rush into extremely advanced and intense practices right off the bat. Okay, so you need to know yourself, know your own individual context, and do the appropriate thing for yourself. The same way that if you've been sedentary for the last 5 years, you shouldn't go run a marathon tomorrow or try to bench press 500 pounds, right? You need to start slowly and gently with a small dose, with lighter weights, lower intensity, right? Same principles apply here. Steve, for someone who is already stressed and overloaded, your presentation was way too fast-paced for me to keep up. Will there be a replay? I'd like to see what I missed and share it with others. Yes, that there will be, most likely. I'm not positive yet. But the reason I did that is because I knew I have a lot of information to cover, and my goal is to really deliver a huge amount of practical value for free in this presentation. I didn't want to just deliver a bunch of fluff. I wanted to actually give you a whole bunch of amazing science and tools to help improve your physiology right now. So I know that I covered it fast, and that was my way of just trying to give a lot of value. So I hope you can appreciate that. Celeste, let's see. It's an automatic assumption that hold the breath means you're inhaling and holding. Yeah, great question. So I didn't talk about this specifically, but the short answer is when people like, let's say free divers, when they hold the breath and do a deep dive, they do it after an inhale. Hold, okay? And there's a lot of research that's been done on that. That's sort of the more traditional breath holding methodology. But the more modern breath holding that has been validated by pulse oximetry is breath holding after the exhale. And when you do it that way, you lower oxygen levels, blood oxygen levels, much more profoundly. So you stimulate greater amounts, greater degrees of a lot of those adaptations that I was talking about by inducing low blood oxygen levels by doing the breath hold after the exhale as opposed to the inhale. So great question, by the way, Celeste. Joyce said, excellent, love all the science. I do research for physicians and nurses, all great research to back this up. Wonderful, Joyce. Celeste also said, I'm a yoga therapist, so I get what you're trying to do. Okay. Matt, so Joyce said, how long is this price in effect? It's only going to be here for the next few days during this initial launch, then it's going up to $497. Matt said, can you mention again how to do the baseline bolt level in the morning? My audio went out during this and the physiological side. Well, I don't want to spend too much going over this in detail, but the bolt score is basically normal breaths, hold after an exhale. You're holding your breath until the first urge to breathe. Okay, so you can set a timer or count the seconds in your head and measure that in the first minute of the day, and you want to track that. And see, as your bolt improves, you're going to notice big improvements in your energy levels and in terms of your physical performance and in terms of reduced anxiety levels. The physiological sigh is a double inhale through the nose and then an exhale through the mouth. Okay, double inhale where the first one is longer and then another little intense sort of snort through the nose to fully open the alveoli of the lungs, and then a very long, pronounced exhale through the mouth. Raj says, great set of information. Thank you, Raj. D, thanks for the answer. Obvious, I need to engage in these breathing exercises. Yes, most people do. They were huge for me personally, too. Sharon said, how long do we have access? Is there a time limit? There is no time limit. You have permanent access to the program. James said, I normally have to pee within 5 minutes. This is a long presentation, but I'm still holding off using humming. Why is that? Amy said, can you recommend a Train the Trainer program for this material? If so, let me know. No, this is all brand new material. The only place you're going to find this material is in this program. So there's no, we haven't built any Train the Training program, and there's nobody else who's built one like this. Patrick has some programs that he sells on his site, but this material that you're going to get in this program that I've partnered with him on actually includes a whole bunch of stuff beyond just the stuff that Patrick teaches. There's a whole bunch of contributions from me, as well as a good friend of mine who produces the intermittent hypoxic training fully guided practices. So yeah, we've got those 6 levels plus the bonus one of the elite level practices. So like 7 levels of those practices, from beginner, from severe chronic fatigue, up to elite levels of, you know, even special forces, you know, Navy SEAL types of practices that'll take you to that level. Okay, Claire said, I really like the humming practice. Yeah, me too. Great thing to do during sex, by the way, too. You know, if you think during sex, one of the things that we sometimes do unconsciously is right? Like kind of those moaning sounds. And those sounds, if you now connect the dots to what I was telling you, if you do that while nasal breathing, you're actually creating a surge of nitric oxide that can help with blood flow and help, let's say, increase your pleasure during the sexual activity. Steve said, at work, I must wear a mask many times more than 10 to 12 hours a day. I've noticed that since the pandemic, I've begun to snore in my sleep. Which techniques should I use to help this? There's something in the program, there's several practices where you learn how to unblock the nose and open up those airways. One simple practice for nose unblocking that works very effectively is to stand up and walk. And what you're going to do is simply exhale, hold your breath, take a bunch of steps, take as many paces as you can before the urge to breathe comes up. And then when you need to breathe, breathe, rest for about a minute with normal breathing, and then repeat that walking breath hold practice a few more times. And you'll notice that after you do that, your nose goes from clogged to really open. And all of a sudden, within a few minutes, you can breathe through your nose. So that's one really powerful practice, but there's a whole section in there that Patrick has his own unique methods and several specific exercises to progressively open those airways and retrain the nervous system how to breathe predominantly through the nose rather than the mouth. You actually have to, especially in the context of sleep where you can't consciously regulate it, you have to train your nervous system how to do that automatically. Okay, Mark said, can I share this presentation with others? Potentially, yes. Sharon, is there a time limit on access to the program itself? No, you get permanent access. Yvonne, how can I forward this to friends? I have, we will, I'm pretty sure we can set up the replay for this. I'm not sure if the tech allows it, but I think so. And then I'll send out the replay to people. So if you want to share it with friends or family, I highly recommend that, you know, and especially given the links of what I was talking to you about as far as intermittent hypoxic training and COVID, that might be a wonderful thing to do, a wonderful gift to give them. A few minutes a day, and you can potentially reduce, no medical claims here, but you can potentially, through these practices, reduce your odds of having a severe outcome. Joyce, amazing and all in the scientific literature. Great job. Thank you, Joyce. Ness, thank you. It's been a great and informative presentation. Thanks so much, Ness. Greg, I took a lot of this training when I took free diving training. I have some anecdotal feedback that may be relevant, including Buddy blacking out in the pool because of vasodilation due to hypocapnia after hyperventilation. Yep, that's why I said don't do it in a pool. Also, I believe fungicides and mycotoxins may have nasal sinus complications based on my experience. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, please send me that via email. You can send it to ari@theenergyblueprint.com. I'd be very interested to see what you have to say. Joyce, okay. Are these video recordings and not just audio? We actually have both. There's video and audio tracks, so you can see visually what's going on, and you also can download audios if you want to use them on the go and you want to just listen once you actually have seen the visual and you know how to do it. Ness, how many bolts each morning? Just one. Takes less than a minute. Just write down your bolt as soon as you wake up and write down your energy level and your anxiety level. Track that over time. Again, as you improve your bolt through doing these practices, you're going to see big improvements in your life. Milada said, are the modules offered as CDs or are they on the web? They're all on the web. I don't think anybody does anything with CDs anymore these days. But yeah, it's all digital access online and you get permanent access. Bonnie, what's your take on breath work for trauma release? Are those practices healthy? Yeah, I think it can be wonderful. The reason that we're not doing that specifically in this course is that's better to do in the context of psychotherapy practice, like one-on-one practice with a practitioner who can help guide you, because there is a potential in those kinds of contexts for someone to sort of re-experience their trauma, especially if someone has PTSD. They can be triggered back into their trauma, and that really needs to be done under the guidance of a therapist who knows what they're doing and can give you that one-on-one attention. So, but I do think they're great techniques. It's a great form of therapy. Wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for sharing such a huge amount of valuable knowledge and research. Looking forward to using all this for our whole family. Awesome, Annette. Wonderful. You're welcome, Matt. Valerie, we do appreciate how meaty your presentation was. Kudos for 3 hours of nonstop talk. Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that, Valerie. And yeah, part of the reason I have that kind of energy and stamina and brain function is the result of these practices. Katie, I made the purchase and received the receipt, but don't know how to access the program. Katie, you should receive an email within a few minutes, and it should give you your login info of exactly how to access the program. One of the things that might be happening is when there's a huge surge of people purchasing, sometimes the tech gets backed up a little bit. It might take 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes at the most before some of those emails go out. Carol, thank you so much. I'm excited to get started and believe this will change my life. Yes, I believe it will too, and I guarantee it. So you have 30 days to try it out fully. If you don't love it, if you don't actually see big improvements in your life, you get your money back. And, you know, again, this is something that really takes a minimal amount of effort. I know I probably overwhelmed a lot of people by talking about all these complex layers of the science and, you know, all these different gases and CO2 and oxygen and the Bohr effect and all these different things. But the reality is these practices are as simple as learning a few different techniques, practicing them for 5, 10, 15 minutes a day. They're easy, they're simple. We've got the fully guided practices. All you got to do is press play, follow along, and it's really that simple, and you will experience profound results. And if you don't, you get your money back. So you have nothing to lose. You've got a ton to gain. Okay, Cheryl said, loved it. I bought it. I'm starting it. Wonderful. Linda said, how will the program help COPD and sleep apnea? Yeah, great question. There's a whole specific track for that, where Patrick's actually been working with thousands of sleep apnea and COPD clients for years and years and years, and has had absolutely phenomenal results, way better than pretty much any other breathing expert out there. And he's developed over the years this specific methodology for people dealing with those situations. So, you know, like I said, we've got the whole track for that context in the program, and it makes a huge difference. Huge, huge, huge. Donna, I would like to share this presentation with a few who couldn't attend. Yeah, we'll find a way to send out a replay. The winner of the men's, Matt said, the winner of the men's 50-meter freestyle race in Tokyo Olympics won largely because he did not take one breath for those 50 meters. Similar training. Wow, that's impressive. I didn't know that. Amazing. Yeah, well, there's no doubt that those people are doing, Olympic swimmers are doing a lot of training to increase their lung capacity and a lot of intermittent hypoxic training. There's no question that all those adaptations that I talked about would make a huge difference in any physical activity, but especially swimming, where you can't take lots of breaths very easily. Okay, we're running out of questions here very fast. If anybody else has questions, there's still a whole bunch of people on this call. So if you've got questions, now's the time to ask them. Otherwise, we're going to end really soon. I'll go as long as questions keep getting asked. Okay, D said, thanks very much for doing this presentation. I never realized how much my bad breathing habits was influencing so many areas of my very poor health. Yeah, this is huge. And I don't think it's an understatement to say that more than 80% of people have dysfunctional breathing habits and are chronically dealing with too low of CO2 and inefficient oxygen delivery to their cells. And especially if we're talking about people over the age of 40, younger, healthier people, younger people, I should say, tend probably to, on average, not have nearly as much incidence or prevalence of dysfunctional breathing, but it's extremely common in people over the age of 40. And this is really one of the big sort of hidden secrets of modern health science, where almost no one in the population and almost no doctors and health practitioners are aware of this profound relationship between our breathing and our physiology, and are aware of the fact that most people have been chronically wired their autonomic nervous system into regulating their breathing in a dysfunctional way that's contributing to fatigue and poor brain function and poor mood and anxiety and all of these different problems that I've talked about. So it's extremely common, and yet it's this hidden sort of secret thing that so few people know about. It's really remarkable, and it's one of the big keys to health that is a true secret that very few people know about. James said, I tried to purchase and I got an error code. If that happened, James, what I would recommend is just try a different browser. So to copy and paste that link and see if you can copy it into a different internet browser or try it on a different device, and hopefully it works. It's possible maybe the site got overwhelmed with people purchasing. I don't know exactly, but I definitely know there are people saying that they're purchasing successfully. So it should be working. Maybe the server just crashed briefly. Not sure what happened there. Okay, let me turn off my little blue light blocker on my screen here. Okay, Raj, what sort of exercise provides the best hormesis for mitochondrial health? Yeah, that's a really deep question, a good question, and a very complex question. So the answer is that different types of exercise, well, think of it this way. Every type of hormesis, from intermittent hypoxic training to cold exposure, to sauna therapy, to fasting, to phytochemicals, to many other types of hormesis, red and near infrared light exposure, UV light exposure, they all are technically forms of hormesis, but they all have their unique fingerprint of what specific adaptations they are stimulating in the body. So fasting doesn't stimulate the same adaptations as exercise and doesn't stimulate the same adaptations as intermittent hypoxic training. Okay, there might be some overlap in some of the mechanisms, but they're fundamentally different. So for example, phytonutrients or fasting doesn't stimulate EPO or increased red blood cells. It doesn't stimulate altering the lung-blood interface or the blood-cell interface to enhance oxygen extraction and utilization, right? There's fundamental differences in the fingerprint of those hormetic stressors and what kinds of adaptations they're stimulating in the body. So even in terms of exercise, we kind of talk about it as one thing, exercise, but there are many different types of exercise, and they actually have their own unique signature, their own unique fingerprint of adaptations they stimulate in the body. So powerlifting, doing sets of 1 to 5 reps of really heavy weights is a very different thing than bodybuilding style weightlifting, which is a very different thing than high intensity interval training, which is a very different thing than steady state endurance training or cardio, right? These all stimulate different kinds of adaptations in the body. And to simplify a very complex answer, the short answer is that all of the different kinds of adaptations that you get from everything from weight training to endurance training and to high intensity interval training all have unique adaptations that are uniquely beneficial. So there isn't one best type. But what I do recommend to you is don't do only one type of those. You should ideally have a mix of all 3 of them if you can. If you are really into fitness and exercise, ideally you'd have some kind of a mix of the strength training, which could also be body weight training or gymnastics training and things like that, mixed with more endurance training, mixed with some high intensity interval training. So ideally you have some bit of layering of all 3 of those in your life. And if you're not really into exercise, then the best advice I can give you is do the type of exercise that you enjoy the most and that you will actually do consistently. Because whatever type of exercise done consistently is way better than, the most optimal program ever that you don't do consistently. So that's my best advice there. If you love biking, do that. If you love swimming, do that. If you love hiking, do that. If you love dancing or yoga, do that. If whatever type of exercise is the one you'll do consistently is the best. But in an ideal world, if you're seeking the ultimate in terms of physiological adaptations, you want all 3 of those types of exercise. Okay. Any other questions? I see 2 more questions here. If you have more questions, now is the time to ask them, because I'm going to end this real soon. Okay, Donna said, I have restless leg syndrome and sleep apnea and chronic nausea. Would this help nausea? I have no idea, Donna. Sorry. It's possible that it might, but I don't know the mechanisms of nausea and how that would tie into this training. So I definitely don't want to make a promise around that if I'm not certain that it will. So no promises there. It's possible, but I really don't know. Aaron, I'm guessing since a baby shows healthy breathing, then all ages should have a higher BOLT score. My 15-year-old and I were both about 10 to 12. I'm 55. Yeah, well, if you're 15-year-old, there's a few different factors that could influence that. That's definitely a very low score for a 15-year-old. That's very unusual. I would have him or her try it again a few times and see if it changes just from repeating the measurement. Maybe they were just anxious or something like that and stopped too soon, or maybe they saw you stop and so they stopped. Something like that, but definitely it's a low score for a 15-year-old. If they're in decent metabolic health, if they have a good lifestyle, if they're athletes at all, if they do physical activity, I would expect it to be at least 30, if not greater. Claire, can you briefly recap what is CO2 threshold and tolerance? If I can tolerate more CO2, I should be able to release more O2 into the cells and tissues. Is that correct? Yes, that is correct. So basically, what's going on is, if I can go, maybe I'll briefly scroll back to, where is it? Here we go. Okay. So what's going on here is that there are a few different factors in our lifestyle that can stimulate our sympathetic nervous system to increase heart rate, increase breathing rate, and that can also stimulate our body to become hypersensitive to CO2, which wires in as the new baseline state regulated by our brain which wires in overbreathing and low CO2 levels. And those factors are chronic stress and anxiety, being sedentary and like not having good physical fitness for a long period of time, for years, and processed food consumption. Okay, and the reason why is this is very straightforward. Chronic anxiety and stress directly stimulate the parasympathetic system and cause the brain to want to get rid of carbon dioxide to try to lower levels of stress. Lack of physical activity causes, when you're sedentary for long periods of time, it causes a mismatch between the production of CO2 from your cells versus the sensitivity of the brain. So the brain's trying to get rid of CO2, and there's this mismatch between how much is being produced versus how much your body's getting rid of. And processed food consumption basically increases the acid load on the body, which the blood is always trying to stay in a very narrow pH range. So when you have increasingly acidic foods in the diet, that stresses that buffering system. And CO2 in the blood is actually one of the main things that the body uses to control the pH of the blood, the acidity or alkalinity. So when you have too much acid load in the bloodstream, the body actually reduces CO2 to keep the pH of the blood in the normal range. So in other words, eating a crappy diet leads to lower levels of CO2 in the body. And all three of these different things, some combination of them, or could be for some individuals one more than others, lead to wiring into the nervous system in the brain, regulating baseline breathing in a state of chronic overbreathing and chronic hypersensitivity to carbon dioxide levels. And that hypersensitivity to carbon dioxide does two things. One, it makes you very prone to anxiety, and two, it does more than two things, but these are two main ones that we focused on. Okay, it increases anxiety and it lowers CO2 levels in the blood, which means less efficient delivery of oxygen to your cells. So hopefully that makes sense. Claire? Okay. Oh, James is saying that hopefully the server didn't go down. I'm going to text my tech guy here. It's saying, James said, access denied. The website is using a security service to protect itself from online attacks. What may have happened there is the rapid surge of hundreds or thousands of people that just went to that order page to buy may have triggered the site to shut down because it thought it was being attacked by a hacker or something. I forget what they call those in tech speak, but there's a certain, it's like brute force or something like that, where they attack the site by, rapidly doing things. Okay, my tech guy said all is well, but James, maybe try a different browser or something. I don't know what to tell you. Sorry, hopefully it's not down, but my tech guy is saying it's good. I'm just going to double check. Okay. So, Valerie, there was a suggestion of blowing a balloon to train and increase lung capacity in COVID patients. Would that be part of a valuable respiratory exercise besides intermittent hypoxic training? Yes, absolutely. There's resistance respiratory muscle training, inspiratory on the inhale and expiratory. And there are tools that you can use for both or one or the other. So balloons are just training the exhale, expiratory, respiratory muscle training. And there are also different tools, breathing resistance trainers that you can get for 20 or 30 bucks that help train that as well. And those can actually train to strengthen the respiratory muscles. Importantly, those respiratory muscles, the diaphragm and a lot of the other respiratory muscles, get weaker when you are predominantly a mouth breather instead of a nose breather. And the reason why is this is a bigger orifice. The mouth is a bigger orifice than the nostrils. And so there's less resistance for air to come in and out of the mouth as opposed to the nose. And less resistance on all of those thousands of breaths that you're taking each day means that those muscles are getting less of a workout. So they become lazy, they become essentially atrophied or weaker as a result of not being challenged enough. So using different tools like that to strengthen those muscles can be absolutely very useful in helping to build up the respiratory muscles. It's a considerably different thing, but it is also very useful and is a great supplementary practice to everything that we talked about in this training. So it is something I recommend. It is a great tool, but it's not necessary. Let's put it that way. We covered a lot of material. Okay. So, Linda, is all the information you presented today available in the programs? Yes, actually, I go way deeper into this. For example, in the anxiety section that I covered in this session, you get, I only showed you actually the first 2 steps of that 4-step training system in this presentation. There's 2 other steps to that process to rewire your nervous system out of anxiety and stress mode that I teach in the program itself. So that's just one example, but yes, I go way, way deeper into a lot of this material. And of course, you're going to get lots and lots and lots of specific fully guided practices from me, from Patrick, and from another good friend of mine. Okay. Barbara, do you think your program would be too much for someone approaching 80 who is not currently exercising much now? Great question. Absolutely not. No. So the reason why is because this program covers the entire spectrum of progression, from the simplest and gentlest, easiest practices for people in very poor states of health, who are very fragile, who are very ill, all the way up to advanced high-level athletes or special forces, military special forces. It covers the entire range. So that was the big goal here. One of the big keys to this is there's absolutely no one-size-fits-all breathing program. It's impossible to create these practices in a way where I just gave you, one intermittent hypoxic training practice, one track that's specific for a particular context. So we're covering the entire range of different problems, people with severe chronic fatigue, people with anxiety and stress issues, panic disorder, people with obstructive sleep apnea and who have blocked noses, as well as healthy people who are already fit, who are already high energy, who are looking to take things to the next level. So we've covered the whole spectrum, and from the most fragile, ill people with the gentlest practices, and we have the full range of progression to scale you up all the way to very, very high level advanced practices that are probably beyond the capability of most people. So everything is there. As far as you want to go, we have the ability to take you there. And we really do, especially Patrick does a wonderful job of making the practices extremely gentle and appropriate for people in that kind of situation, Barbara. So yeah, I think this program is going to be perfect, and I think you're going to love it. And to be honest, these practices are way gentler than exercise. So it's way easier for someone like you to start to progress into doing these practices, the gentler versions of these practices, than it is to jump into any sort of exercise routine. And by doing these practices, you'll actually build a wonderful foundation of fitness that will translate into your exercise routine if you ever decide to start that. Okay. Claire said, so much awesome information, so useful for me personally and professionally. Thank you for your time. My pleasure, Claire. Glad you enjoyed it. Agneta, is it bad to exercise if you have a low BOLT score? It's not necessarily bad to exercise across the board. However, a low BOLT score might and very often indicates very poor health. And especially if it's indicating severe chronic fatigue, like full-blown chronic fatigue syndrome. In general, one of the symptoms, and actually one of the diagnostic criteria for people with chronic fatigue syndrome is something called wow, I'm spacing on it. It's the post-exertional malaise. There we go. It's an unusual word. Post-exertional malaise. And basically what that means is that after doing physical activity, you will feel, oftentimes for a day or 2 or 3, wiped out. You'll feel exhausted from it. Instead of feeling energized and healthy, people in very extreme states of chronic fatigue syndrome will really respond very, very poorly to that and have a very negative reaction to it. So what you're asking is it bad to exercise if you have a low BOLT score? Not necessarily, but if you are in a state of severely poor health, of severe chronic fatigue syndrome, where you have post-exertional malaise and you have extreme intolerance to physical exercise, yes, it is not a good idea to jump into exercise. And actually, it's a way better idea to start here, to start with the gentle breathing practices, the chronic fatigue track first. And then once you build that foundation, then you can start to gently go into the first levels of the guided intermittent hypoxic training lessons. Okay. Agneta, should you do breathing exercise first? Yeah, so I just answered, that was a kind of a follow-up question to your other one. So yes, I answered that. It is a way better idea for people with extremely low BOLT scores or extreme states of chronic fatigue to start here before trying to jump into especially any type of really intense physical exercise. Walking might not be a problem, or if you're really severely poor health, walking could be a problem. But if you're able to walk or do very gentle, light activity, that is obviously a very good thing to do. But yes, in general, the lower your BOLT score is, the more likely it is that exercise is not going to be a great place to start, and this is going to be the right place to start for you. And that's why I said before, this is the single most powerful way to reliably increase energy levels in those with chronic fatigue. Because exercise is often not. Exercise is often counterproductive for people with chronic fatigue because it just makes them worse. So this is a wonderful tool that you can dose and scale the intensity of to match your current state of health and really progress your way up in a way that doesn't tax the system nearly as heavily, doesn't tax you in terms of your nervous system or metabolically in terms of using up energy nearly as much as exercise does. Sherry, I've purchased the program and received the emails. There was a download for okay. I'll have my tech guy look into that. Thank you, Sherry, for letting me know. I appreciate that. James, Preston, if you're watching this, I'd appreciate if you could try to take care of what Sherry was talking about. Feel free to just ignore it, Sherry. Or feel free to download the other stuff. It's also great information if you'd like to get it, but it's not necessarily designed to be in there. James is saying, same error code. It does not like China. That might be why, James. Yeah, if you're in China, that might be the reason that it's giving you an error code. I don't know if you have the ability to use a VPN server sorry, I'm not a great tech guy here, but I think there's something called a VPN server, a virtual private network or something like that can change the IP address of your computer to one that's not in China, and that should allow you to purchase it. Sorry about that, James. Yeah, we were getting bombarded this about a year ago from hackers from China, and we basically just decided to prevent people in China from even viewing the site to try to prevent all these hackers from bombarding us. Diana, I was sunbathing for 30 minutes before the webinar, and I was surprised that I got a score of 40 as I eat well, but do not exercise much. When I do, it's jumping. Does the sun make a difference? Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So one of the things that the sun does is actually dilate blood vessels and increase blood flow throughout the body. So it is very possible that sunbathing doing right before the Bolt score could make a difference. Also, if you were laying down in a very relaxed state, being in a very relaxed state itself could make a difference to getting a longer Bolt score. So great question, Diana. Okay, Luisa, could the program work for a post-COVID person with low breathing capacity? Yes. And in fact, one of the studies that I showed was about COVID rehabilitation. So yes, that is very likely. And one of the things that needs to be done is to oxygenate those tissues, rebuild those tissues, and like repair a lot of that cellular damage in the lungs and in the blood vessels. And this is an extremely powerful way of doing that. Okay. James, sorry you're still having issues with getting to the order page. I really have no idea, but you can email support@theenergyblueprint.com if you're having difficulty going to the order page, and the support person can help you do a manual order. So we'll find a way to do that. It shouldn't be hard. We can send you an invoice via PayPal and do it that way. But yeah, sorry about that. I'm really not a tech person, so it's hard for me to figure this out in real time as I'm here trying to answer questions. And honestly, if I wasn't here answering questions, I don't think I would have the tech knowledge to figure it out anyway. So sorry, James, but just send an email to support@theenergyblueprint.com and we'll get you set up. Any other questions, guys? If there is any other questions, now's the time to ask, because right now we're out. So if you're waiting to ask something, now's the time. I'll hang out for another 30 seconds or so. Okay, Valerie said their purchase went through. D said, with the intermittent hypoxic training, do you have to do the rapid fire breathing first? No, not necessarily. You don't have to do any rapid breathing necessarily, but it does help for a couple of reasons. One, it flushes CO2 out of the system, so you're going to hold your breath for a much longer period of time by doing that first. And the other thing you're doing is actually creating an increased sympathetic activation. You're creating a state of sympathetic activation of essentially stress physiology. And that gives you that opportunity for mental training, for calmness during the state of physiological stress. So there's a few things that it's doing for you. It's also increasing neuroplasticity. When we do those strong inhale emphasized breaths, it induces this state of increased neuroplasticity in the brain. And that allows us, when we pair that with that sort of mental training for calmness during the physiological stress, we can actually wire that into our physiology because we've created this biochemical milieu for increased neuroplasticity. That means the brain has an increased ability in that state, in that physiological state, from those chemicals that are present, where it can wire together and create new connections more profoundly, or disconnect certain things, right? If you have a propensity for anxiety, you can consciously learn how to retrain your physiology, retrain your brain and nervous system out of that state by doing this practice. So it's very, very useful. Okay. Diana, how can this help a child with Down syndrome? I do not know. I don't know if there's any particular relationship with Down syndrome in particular, and I wouldn't know how to speak to any mechanisms of how this is working in relationship to Down syndrome. It may or may not help. I mean, the truth is that this is going to improve your physiology, period. Okay, it's going to improve your health. It's going to improve your physiology. It's going to improve your circulation. It's going to improve your brain function and your energy levels. Now, if the person you're speaking of has issues with those kinds of things, it's likely to help them. But Down syndrome is obviously a genetic disorder, and these training methods can't address the root causes of Down syndrome in any way, but they can certainly address things like energy levels, brain function, and anxiety and chronic stress and negative affect or mood dysfunctions of various kinds. So there's definitely a possibility it could help as far as certain behaviors and subjective well-being, the person's experience, their quality of life, and their overall health and longevity. But again, it obviously can't address the root causes of that. Amanda's asking about my upcoming book, Eating for Energy. If I have a pre-order link, no, not yet. We're not quite at that stage yet. But it's going to be published by Hay House, which I'm excited about. It's my first book with a big name publishing house. Gabrielle is, what's the website address to order? It is whatever the link is. There should be a button on this page to order. I don't know the link offhand, but it should be there, and it should look like a little button like this, and you should be able to click on it. But I don't know the actual URL offhand. Gabrielle, I want to order but need to move money to be able to do this, and I must do that during business hours. Okay, well, I'll let you figure that out. Nora, can you explain more about how to include walking in the hypoxic training? You breathe first, then walk and count paces while holding the breath. Yes, exactly. So it can either be done with the rapid breathing in between, or it can be done with just normal breaths in between. So every now and then, what you can do is just take a breath, fully exhale, while you're on a walk, fully exhale out all the air, hold, and take as many steps as you can. Count your paces, count the number of steps that you get, and kind of try to keep an ongoing tab of that to see if you can beat your record every time that you take a walk. So each day, maybe try to get one more pace than the previous day. So that's basically how you do it. It's pretty simple, and that's by keeping tabs on how many paces you got, it allows you to progress. It allows you to push yourself just a little bit further. Gail, thank you so much. D, interesting on the neuroplasticity. I've had a few strokes, so I'll try a short stint of the rapid fire breathing. Awesome, D. Very, very good. Sherry, thank you so much for being so willing to share all your knowledge and so patiently and speaking so patiently, sharing all your knowledge so patiently and clearly. It's very much appreciated. Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate that. Diana, talking about Down syndrome, they breathe with mouth open. Yes, if you can help them in training nasal breathing, that can absolutely make a big, big difference. Gail posted the URL for the order page, so that's there. Now, if you want to use that, it's there for you. Gabrielle said, will this link work in 2 days? Yes, it should. James just emailed support. I have about 6 purchases. The purchases went through, and I did not realize it. Awesome. I'm glad it went through for you, James. Sorry you got sort of mixed messages if you saw an error code or something like that. And then support will refund any excess purchases that went through. Nora said, do all the parts of each module contain guided exercises? Yes, absolutely. In fact, the main info, the main sort of information that is non-guided practices is the initial module with me. All of the tracks with Patrick are entirely guided practices. There's maybe a few videos with some intro knowledge, but basically they're just filled with specific guided practices. Okay. Gabrielle, great job, Ari. This is great. And there was so much information. You did a great job. Thank you so much, Gabrielle. Okay. Any last questions before we end? one other thing I want to mention to you is I want you to just consider for a moment what it would be like to not do this. Have you been struggling in your life with low levels of energy? Have you been struggling with, going through your days stressed and anxious and annoyed and agitated and irritable? Well, what does it mean to your life to go through the next years, the next decades of your life in those states, in a chronically fatigued state, in a chronically stressed state? These are the things that massively influence our overall quality of life and our ability to live a good life. If you're chronically fatigued, it negatively influences just about everything in your life, from your career to your relationships to your ability to pursue your goals and objectives and dreams in life. Everything suffers when you have lower energy levels, lower brain capacity, and less energy and a poorer mood and higher levels of anxiety than you should have. Everything in your life takes a hit. So if you're on the fence, just consider, what would it mean to your life to have 20% or 50% increased energy levels every day for the next several decades of your life? What would it mean to your life to have 20% or 30% or 50% less anxiety every day and less stress every day for the rest of your life? Is that worth spending a few minutes a day doing these practices to retrain your physiology and your nervous system into a more optimal state? I think the obvious answer is yes. And I hope your answer is yes. And I hope you can do that. You can really think it through and take this opportunity to learn these techniques to rewire your physiology and build a high energy, relaxed body. It will make an enormous difference in the quality of life for the rest of your life. And I really hope you take advantage of this. So click the buy now button, get started, and I will see you in the program. I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation, and I really hope you will take advantage of this offer and do this program. I promise it's going to be life-changing for you. You've got 30 days to try it out fully, test it out. I think you're going to see huge results in your life, and I guarantee it, actually. If you don't, for any reason, you get your money back. So we're guaranteeing huge results, nothing to lose. You have so much to gain. Try out the program. I hope to see you there.